Hello, and welcome to Bear Necessities. My name is Bear, and today I'm going to be talking about my initial impressions of Path of Exile 2 from a pretty new player of the Path of Exile series. I'm going to talk about what I liked, what I disliked, and what I hope they change in the future. One caveat to take into consideration is that this game is in early access, so a number of issues I run into are things that should and will likely get fixed before launch. When it comes to ARPGs, I've only really played Diablo 3 and 4, Path of Exile 1 up to around level 40, and Last Epoch. Of those games, Last Epoch was actually my favorite ARPG and the only one I actually got to the in-game loop and pushed corruption on. So now that you know a little bit of my background, let's jump into it. First, let's talk about graphics. The graphics in Path of Exile 2 are amazing, with great lighting, wonderful contrast depending on setting and mood, and hyper-realistic models. However, there are a number of optimization issues. I crashed regularly from random graphics error pop-ups, or the game would just close randomly while playing. The Po2 devs did put in an amazing failsafe for these occurrences. For example, if you do crash, or maybe you lose internet connection, the servers detect this and pause the game. I'm sure people who play hardcore definitely appreciate this, especially when disconnection or crash deaths are the worst way to end a hardcore run. Number 2, storyline. The storyline in Path of Exile 2 is actually really interesting and has voice acting for all of the dialogue. Throughout the game, you will come upon a number of various lore items as well that will dive deeper into the lore. If you are more of a casual gamer that is interested in the story, I think you'll definitely enjoy that part of Path of Exile 2. Number 3, controller support and user interface. I wanted to talk about the user interface next, but before that, I really wanted to discuss controller support. Path of Exile 2 controller support is actually really amazing, and is my preferred way to play the game. I'm not sure it would work well for every single build, but for mine, it worked in about 80% of scenarios. The key binding to controller buttons as well as allowing 2 hotbars felt really nice. After getting a bit of muscle memory, it made long sessions feel really comfortable to play. I usually get a bit fatigued playing ARPGs with mouse and keyboard because of excessive clicking, but with controller it was a breeze. Also, Po2 offers WASD, which is what I started with, and it felt a bit better than point and click, which is what I've historically used for ARPGs in the past. The biggest downside of using a controller is that you can't easily search for gems or support gems when crafting because there's no search field that I could find. Also, if you're going to be linking gear and chatting, then you'd probably want to use a different mode as well. Another downside is that you can't easily swap between modes without fully logging out and logging back in. Hopefully, you'll be able to swap between modes fluidly in the future, so that when you are doing a passive tree, crafting gems, etc., you can go to mouse and keyboard, then when you're ready to grind, you can swap back to controller. Finally, targeted abilities were inconsistent on the controller. For example, Pain Offering requires you to select one of your minions. On controller, I'd often try to turn my character toward my minion and use this ability, but it'd often not spawn the spiked skeleton and it would still use my mana. This is way easier to do on mouse and keyboard. Again, I fully expect that GGG will fix all of these shortfalls in the near future. Continuing on from this, the user interface in general is pretty standard for an ARPG, and as a new player to the series, I didn't find it very confusing at all. The only thing that I had to really watch a guide on was customizing your stash tabs, but I don't think this is necessary to learn for a new user, just a nice to have later on. I did instinctively use M a lot on mouse and keyboard to open the map, and that's not the map key, so that's a bit annoying, but it was just muscle memory from other games. The last thing I want to talk about is game complexity and getting up to speed in this game. First, this game is not easy starting out. Your character feels extremely weak, and the enemies feel extremely strong. The first bosses I encountered took me many deaths and left me feeling like I did something wrong, but honestly, I wasn't doing much wrong. It may have just been my class, but my initial skill gems were very weak, and my build really didn't take off until I got higher level gems. Speaking of builds are very complex. There are active gems, there are spirit gems, there are gem supports, the passive tree is huge. This is very confusing for new players, and honestly, without a few guides from experienced players, it'd have taken ages to figure things out. Gear is complex, and the process of upgrading gear, knowing the possible passives and stats the gear can have, and learning how to use specific orbs and such to get those stats or random roll for those stats is really complex. My recommendation for new players is to watch experienced content creators on YouTube or other platforms and really try to understand their builds. Don't just copy the guides, really try to understand them. Understand the synergies between the passive skill points they get, the gear they get, the active, spirit, and support gems they use, and then build upon that knowledge. To really understand all of these things will take lots of time, and those experienced players can give you a little boost. If you want to brew your own builds from there, you really have to read. Read what all the items you get do, learn about all the different orbs and how they upgrade and change your gear, read about every active, spirit, and support gem and how they change your gameplay, read through the passive tree and use the search function to see what nodes you could use to boost your build. It's honestly going to take a lot of time and effort to really get to this point. So the thing I think Path of Exile 2 really misses on are easier ways to learn these things yourself as a new player. The build I'm running now is a combination of Kripparrian and a Ventrua build. Without their help to initially kick me off, I'd really have been lost. I'm not sure the best way, but maybe Poe 2 could introduce quests that would have you utilize each of these complex concepts and dumb it down a little bit, then push the player to learn from there. Easy to get into, but difficult to master. In conclusion, as a new player, I really did enjoy Poe 2, and I think it's probably the best ARPG I've ever played, barely edging out Last Epoch. Once I get to the in-game loop, I'm sure I'll have more to say, but for now, I'm really enjoying myself, and if you're thinking of trying it, I definitely recommend it. Thanks for watching my video, and I hope you enjoyed my initial impressions on Path of Exile 2, and if you did, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you again real soon.